When the Beatles came to America, they specifically asked to meet him. And he was brought to their hotel. There was a hotel that's still there. I forget the name of it, right across the street from Madison Square Garden. The guy gives me a package of Coke. I take it, I get back in the limo, and I go back to Madison Square Garden, right? I go back up. Now we're in the dressing room, and everybody's blowing Coke and partying. That's the bottom line. It was all about the mob. It was all about celebrities wanting to be around mob guys. I hope everybody saw it today. Finally, Netflix is releasing a show I did for them. I filmed it almost 2 years ago. Jay, I remember Jay when Jay went to the trial. Yeah. John loved Jay. Close to John because of my father. He sang at Vicky Gotti's wedding and he sang at Junior's wedding. Yeah, but only because of my father. When my father went away, he was, that's when he got closer to John after my father went away. Because when my father was home, he was always with my father, and he was, John wasn't the boss yet. You know what I mean? When my father was, John became the boss after my father went to jail. And then he was around Tony Lee and my father, but I really took care of him mostly, Jay. I was very close with Jay from when I first met him. He always took me with him to his shows. When he toured, he took me on tour with him. I had a great times and great memories with Jay. I mean, I did a lot of drugs with him, but what are you gonna do? That's what you did with them, with rock people. You know what I mean? That was the business. That was the scene. You know what I mean? That was the scene. Cocaine, marijuana. That was the scene. When he first came around, when we first met him, he had a charting record, This Magic Moment. That was the last really record that he put out that charted. This Magic Moment. So when we met him, he had a record in the top 10 on Billboard. So he was still booming. His shows were all sold. He always sold out. I mean, the guy was doing, there was a guy back then, a big rock and roll producer. I can't think of his name right now. Kirshner or something like that. But he was a big rock promoter, and he was very tight with Jay. That's the guy that gave Jay the nickname The Voice. And there was rock shows going on, and he was the headliner. Jay was all the old groups from the '60s. Jay, Puckett and the Jimmy Puckett, whatever his name was. Like all the '60 groups. And then when even Frankie Valli signed on, and then Jay, when Frankie had all them hits in the '70s, all them disco hits and all that, and Grease and Swear to God, that's what. Yeah. So when Frankie Valli had all those hits, Jay was Frankie's opening act. They were selling out the Garden. It was a double ticket. It wasn't like Jay was a Fleabag opening act for another group. It was like a team, and it was crazy. I remember, this is a good story. So I was maybe 21, and they were doing the Garden, the two of them. Jay and Frankie Valli were doing the Garden. Jay was opening up for Frankie, and it was sold out. Now, Madison Square, this is the first time I went to the Garden with them. No, it wasn't. It was the first time I went to the Garden, and I was going backstage. The other times I went to the Garden, Jay was there with a whole bunch of groups, and we just went to see the show. But this time I was actually going back, hanging out like the whole day. So I remember Jay lived in my father's house, which I talked about with his son Jason on my podcast, when we owned a house in Howell Beach, and we had moved out back to the old house because my mother didn't like Howell Beach. Jay was living in my father's house in Howell Beach with his wife, Kathy at the time, and his two kids, Jason and Samantha. And they were doing the Garden that day. Frankie Valli and Jay was the opening act, Jay and the Americans. And I went to Jay's house early in the morning, and about an hour later, a limo pulled up, And me and Jay went out of the house, and it was Frankie Valli came to pick us up in a limo. Now here I am. I'm 21 years old. It's the early 70s. I'm in a limousine with Frankie Valli and Jay Black and me. Right? Now here, right? And we're driving to Madison Square Garden, right? So now we go in, and in Madison Square Garden, the limos pull in right behind the stage. It's a driveway that goes right into the Madison Square Garden, and you go right behind the stage. So so the limo goes in, we go in, and we're in the dressing room, and Frankie Valli tells me this was Elvis's dressing room. Now I'm sitting in a dressing room in Madison Square Garden, and I'm probably sitting in a chair that Elvis sat in, right now. And now we went there early because they had to do a sound check, right? So now here I am. I'm sitting in an empty Madison Square Garden in a seat in an empty Madison Square Garden, and I'm watching Frankie Valli and Jay and the bands and the groups come out onto the stage to do sound checks, right? It was like so cool. And I got the thing on, the VIP thing to go back, right? And I'm sitting there, and the garden is empty. Madison Square Garden is empty. And they're doing sound checks, and Jay singing, Carry Me, and Frankie singing, all his hits, and they're doing sound checks for the rest, for that night for the show. That was really cool. Then people started coming, then it's, so there was a big famous DJ called Murray Decay. He was a famous DJ back then. He actually was so big and popular that when this could be verified, when the Beatles came to America, they specifically asked to meet him. And he was brought to their hotel. There was a hotel that's still there. I forget the name of it, right across the street from Madison Square Garden. And Murray Decay was brought there so the Beatles could personally meet him. That's how big of a disc jockey this guy was on the radio. This guy was the biggest. And his famous thing was Ave. He used to go, Ave. That was his famous thing, right? So anyway, now we're in back of the garden, and people are coming. And so now Jay tells me, listen, gives me a couple of $100. He goes, listen, the driver's going to take you to an apartment in Greenwich Village. They're going to give you a package, right? So now I go, all right. So now I get in the limo. I go to this place in Greenwich Village, and I walk in, and it's a loft. And there's like a party going on, and I knock on the door. Jay sent me, right? The guy opens up the door. I say, Jay Black sent me. All right, come in, right? Beautiful, gorgeous girls all over the loft, party, drinking, snorting. I mean, it was like, oh my God, right? So I walk in, and I walk up, and the guy says, you want a drink? So I go, yeah, I have a drink. And I'm there, and this gorgeous woman, it was like crazy, like it was like a Hollywood party, right? And then the guy gives me a package. It was Coke. It was Coke. The guy gives me a package of Coke. I take it. I get back in the limo, and I go back to Madison Square Garden, right? I go back up. Now we're in the dressing room, and everybody's blowing Coke and partying. And Murray Decay wants to do Coke, right? So I start making Murray Decay doing this, Ave. And every time he did an Ave, they gave him a line of Coke. He was going, Ave, right? I mean, this was my childhood. This is how did someone not get caught up in that? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, but, it wasn't about addiction then. It was about, it was fun. It was recreational. I was having a blast. You know what I mean? It was crazy, and then now it's getting closer to the show. The garden's starting to fill up. The people are starting to come. The audience is, the garden's starting to come. The buzz is starting. The atmosphere's changing. Now it's getting close to showtime. Now I go out into the garden, right, and I'm looking around, and there's all these gorgeous girls. That like Frankie had a hit record. Swear to God, the girls were screaming, "Swear to God, Frankie!" And like I'm taking girls backstage, right? I'm bringing them back to it was just it was crazy, and then, it was just, it was wild. It was a wild time, I actually met a girl there, a rock reporter there, and I wound up spending 2 days with her. She asked me, how do you know them? Like I got Frankie to talk to her for like 10 minutes, you know what I mean? Like she wanted to interview Frankie Valli, and I told Frankie, do me a favor, talk to this girl, you know what I mean? Go, yeah, sure, no problem. I brought her back. She had like a 10-minute conversation with him. She thought who I was. She wound up spending 2 days with me. She was from Jersey. She was a rock reporter from Jersey. So, you know, it was just a crazy time. You know, it was a crazy, crazy time. You know, and my parents and that, they wind up coming to the show too, but they came late. You know, my father came, my mother, Tony Lee, and a whole bunch of people came, and it was crazy. You know, Frankie, you know, Jay sang, and he dedicated songs to him. And Frankie Valli, my mother loved when he used to go up high with his voice. You know, like you know, that when he Sherry Baby and all them, and it's crazy because now it's 20,000 people in Madison Square Garden, right? And Frankie Valli, my mother's sitting like in the second row, and Frankie Valli walks up to the front of the stage. I'll never forget. And he looked down and he said, "This one's for you, Jenny, my baby." And he started singing Sherry Baby, Sherry. Yeah, and he sang Sherry Baby for my mother, and he dedicated it to her at the Garden. You know, it was a great time. You know, I mean, you know, I didn't know the future then, so you know, it was a great time. If I would have known the future then, you know, but I didn't. So it was just a great time to be alive, a great time to be in the mob. You know, it was wild. You know, it was just even moving forward. You know, this would be probably the whole show because I was going to talk about this anyway. Even moving forward, when I got older and I started like meeting celebrities on my own, because people got to remember, I don't know how it is today, but back then, pretty much the entertainment industry was very intertwined with the mob. You know what I mean? Like Mikey Francis talks about it all the time. You know, because his father was well known in the industry. Sonny Francis was a big name in the entertainment industry. I mean, he was very friendly with a lot of stars, and you know, there was wise guys. There was a big wise guy out of Jersey that had a record company. I mean, they were just so involved. They owned all the nightclubs. I mean, you know, at one time they owned all the nightclubs, all the discos. I mean, you know, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So when the discos started opening, you know, like in Manhattan, there was the Hippo that was mob owned, the Red Parrot. The guys that owned the Red Parrot, they were with Paul Castellano. Even Plato's Retreat, the orgy place, the sex club, they were with Paul Castellano. Frankie Panisi owned it. My father used to service them for Paul Castellano. You know, you know, I remember I was in jail and we used to read about Plato's Retreat, the sex club, and that a sex club opened in Manhattan, you know, and we, wow, you know, we're in jail, we're reading about the sex club, and I get a visit one day from my father, right? In Art to Kill. And my father tells me, yeah, this effing Paul Castellano and Frankie Panisi, they got me, because he was good friends, my father, with Frankie Panisi, but Frankie Panisi was with Paul Castellano. But he was very tight with my father. He owned the catering hall called the Lamia. That's where I got married, and Angel Gotti got married there. John Gotti's daughter, Angel, got married there, and Lewis, I got married there with Alice Mayoni. So it was it was a big catering place. And my father was like, and I said, "What club you service?" And he goes, "This Plato's Retreat." I said, "You go to Plato's Retreat?" He says, "When it's closed." I go, "I don't go there when it's open." So, you know, so they just had their hands in everything. In 1980, when I got out of jail, you know, so now I'm growing up around Frankie Valli, Jay Black, you know, so I'm growing up around celebrities. My father, you know, because of the mob, you know, because of his friendships with them. You know, he was friends with Sinatra, my father. He was friends with Louis Prima, very good friends with Louis Prima. You know, Frankie Valli, Jay, of course. You know, actors, Vince Edwards, he was an old-time favorite actor. He used to play Ben Casey, which was a big hit TV show in the 60s. He was a doctor. He played Mr. Universe. He was very good friends with my father. He came from East New York. And my father met a lot of celebrities when he was out. He met John Wayne one night. I mean, so many people. So anyway, I wanted to, so, you know, now I'm hanging out. I get out in 1980. I'm hanging out in the Ritz. And, you know, there's a lot of celebrities coming in and out of the Ritz. I'm meeting all of them, you know, hanging out with them, you know. And it's the first night we met Keith Richards. So we're in the Ritz one night, my brother and I and a couple of us, and Keith Richards is there with his wife, Debbie Hanson, but at the time she was his girlfriend. It was way before they got married. And we're in the Ritz, and we know he's there. We're big Rolling Stones fans, me and my brother, but he's sitting at another table. You know, we're sitting at a table, and we know he's there, but, you know, we're not, you know, going over nothing. We didn't meet him. He's over there with his girl and a couple of people, and we're with our friends and a couple of girls. So just coincidentally, it was a straight up coincidence. At the end of the night, we're leaving the Ritz. So Now it's Webster Hall. Now, for those who don't know, it's Webster Hall. Back then, it was called the Ritz. It was, so we'll leave. It was a rock club. So we're leaving and we're going down the stairs. So we're in front, and by coincidence, on the right behind us is Keith Richards and his party, and they're coming down. And behind us is these two guys that were kind of drunk. Now, my brother was a boxer. My brother was a gym rat. He boxed with Jerry Cooney. He was good friends with Jerry Cooney, heavyweight contender, fought, for the heavyweight title. And my brother was always in the gym, boxing, knockout, either hand, knockout with both hands, one punch. He was a devastating puncher, really ripped up, great shape. My brother was always an athlete, always in great shape. So we're walking out, and these two drunk guys behind us start picking on Keith Richards, and they're calling him names. Stop. So my brother turns around, and he tells them, "Why don't you leave the guy alone? He's not bothering you. He's with his girlfriend and friends. What are you picking on him for?" So one of the guys tell my brother, "Why don't you mind your effing business?" My brother says, "Mind my effing business." In the blink of an eye, my brother goes, boom, bang. He throws two punches. They're both down, the two guys. It was instantaneously. The two guys are down. Boom, bang, and they're both down. Keith Richards, "Oh, thank you. You didn't have to do that," right? So we walk out. Now we're walking out, and right in front of the door is the limousine. There's a picture of this limousine, of him getting into it, and it says the Ritz. I saw it it was in a magazine, but I don't have the picture anymore. I didn't have cameras. There's documentation of him being at the Ritz. I have a picture on my phone of him at the Ritz one night with Tina Turner and Bowie. I was actually there that night in the VIP room when that picture was taken. I have put it up on my Instagram and my Facebook many times, that picture. I was actually there that night with them, hanging out with them in the dressing room. So anyway, so getting back to that other night, so now we converge in the limo. He gets in the limo, and as he's getting in the limo, he sits in the limo, and he tells my brother, "Listen, I'll be here Tuesday night. If you come, I'll be here Tuesday night." And that was the beginning. So Tuesday comes, I see my brother. "What do you want to do? You think he's going to be there? Let's take a ride." Me and my brother get in the car. We take a ride to Manhattan. We go to the Ritz. Sure enough, he's there. We have a couple of drinks with him. He winds up getting close to my brother. He invites my brother to Jamaica. He was hanging out in Bob Marley's house back then in Jamaica. But my brother never went. I wanted to go. My brother didn't want to go. I was, "Let's go." "What do you mean? Let's go." But then we met a lot of celebrities in the Ritz. And that was all because, my father was in the mob. It was all about the mob. That's the bottom line. It was all about the mob. It was all about celebrities wanting to be around mob guys. It wasn't so much mob guys wanted to be around. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like being in their company for the simple fact, we got beautiful women around them, and, we got carte blanche in clubs, and, but they were always hanging out with mob guys. John Gotti knew, when John Gotti knew all the celebs. I mean, they used to come see him. Neil, I mean, everybody, all the mob guys. I mean, a lot of mob guys had celebrities around them. And, Diana Ross sat at my table one night at the Ritz. The owner came out. I was there on a date with a girl sitting at a table. The place was packed. There was some rock guy there. I forget his name. It was so long ago. And he comes out and he tells me, "Oh, my God, I have a problem. I just got a call from Diana Ross. Could she sit at your table? There's nowhere for her to sit." Now, here I am. Who am I? I'm sitting there, and the girl I'm with goes, "Did he just ask you if Diana Ross could sit at our table?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "We're celebrities too." I was teasing her, And sure enough, she came with Gene Simmons, no less, from Kiss. She was dating Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is sitting right next to me. Diana Ross is across the table from me at my table. Two big world-renowned rock stars are sitting at my table. But you think it's never going to end. That lifestyle, you think it's never going to end, and then it comes crashing down on you. That's the message, that's why I always say all that glitters isn't gold. When people hear these stories and wow, that's some way to live. I wish I could do that. Yeah, it's instant gratification. That's all it really is. It's just instant gratification. It was fun that night. You know what I mean? And it's fun to talk about and have a few laughs over and reminisce. But, you know, all that party and all that did was lead me to a dark place, you know, unfortunately. And thank God I overcame that. But at the time it was happening, it was great. You know, life was great. If you enjoy my show, please join my Patreon, ask your questions live, and please join my Patreon at reformgangsters.com. I want to give a shout out to my Patreon member, Judo, Louis B. Anthony. Thanks for your support. Of course. I remember calling this phone to get the number too, the official number. They had way before the lottery, when the numbers used to come out, used to call a number, an 800 number, and it used to say, today's lucky Brooklyn number was 247. Yeah, it was a bootleg line. It was, you know, it was a service. We used to pay them for it. Yeah, it was, and it was illegal, but there was a phone number for it. And tonight's New York number is, because there was two numbers. There was the New York number, and the Brooklyn number was the famous number. That was the one that was in the newspaper. And the New York number was the first, second, and third race. That's how you get, even that they stole from the mob. So they used to call it a bleeder. You could bet two numbers. It was 80-1. But each race, a number came out after the first race. It was called single action, and I worked in the single action office on the phones. So it was the first race was a number came out, the second race a number came out, and then the third race a number came out. And that was called the New York number. That's originally how numbers started. That was called the old way. That was the original number business. That's how the people in Harlem, that was the first way they invented it. And you could either bet one number, because they called it single action. You could bet one number was 12-1, I believe it was, and you could bet two numbers together, that was 80-1, that was called the bleeder, or you could bet three numbers together, that was 500-1, and that was called the old way, the New York number. When the Italians took it over, they added the Brooklyn number, and that was the handle. At the end of the day, the last three numbers of the money of the racetrack handle. It was in the daily news every day. So and we worked in a single action office. We had both. We had single action, Old Way, and Brooklyn. That's why our business was like 90,000 a day, because we were doing both ways. It was crazy money, crazy money. People became millionaires in the number business. And that's another story we'll talk about soon. There are a lot of people asking me stories about Freddie Giovanelli. He was a big number bank. I did business with him. That was the reason why that cop got killed over his number bank. They were under surveillance, but that's a show for another day. I'll just put that out there that we're going to talk about that. I've been getting a lot of questions about Fritzy Giovanelli. I know him intimately. He was very, very dear friends with my family. His uncles hung out in my father's club. I'm going to talk about that in the future. I want to talk about the witness protection program in the future. That was actually, people don't know this, but Mikey Francis reminded me, I just saw him on Instagram, he was talking about it, that the witness protection program was created because of his father, Sonny Francis, because of the witnesses against him. And I want to talk about the process that I went through in the witness protection program. We're going to talk about that in the future. I want to talk about my father too in the future. I want to talk about my father's relationship with John Gotti when John Gotti was a teenager, and my father was a made man before, when John Gotti was a teenager in East New York. I want to talk about that relationship because I've been getting a lot of comments about it, and some people are making some derogatory remarks about their relationship, and I want to clarify some stuff about their relationship, so I want to talk about that in the future. And of course, I hope everybody saw today, finally, Netflix is releasing a show I did for them. I filmed it almost 2 years ago. For all you naysayers out there that are going to get on me when the show comes out about John Gotti, and I'm one of the people on it, So this was way before I did anything with my friend Sammy the Boat, you know what I mean? But, this was almost 2 years ago. The show was filmed and finally edited now, and Netflix gave us a release date. It's going to be October 24th. It's getting released on Netflix. It's going to be 3 episodes. Originally, it was supposed to be Fear City 2. For all of those who remember, Fear City 1 was a big hit. This was originally supposed to be called Fear City 2, but the executives at Netflix, what I'm hearing from them is that it was so good that they renamed it, and they renamed it Get Gotti. And they made it its own show. They didn't want to tie it to Fear City because maybe they're going to do another show, Fair City 2. But this show they're claiming was so good when they saw the rushes and everything that they gave it its own title, which is going to be Get Gotti. And I'm looking forward to that release. It's going to be out on October 24th on Netflix. It should be exciting. I think I did a really good job. I think it's going to be a really good show. The company that produced it, Raw Entertainment, the people were great. The producers, they were very professional. It was a great experience for me. And we all became good friends after it. And I hope everybody out there enjoys it. So don't remember that's going to be October 24th of this year, in a couple of weeks, 5 days before my birthday. It would be a nice birthday present. So I have a question here. How could someone reduce the risk of relapse? Well, first of all, feelings aren't facts. You got to remember that. People are going to want to, listen, I'm clean coming up on 35 years. There's days I want to have a drink. There's days I want to smoke a joint. There's days I wish I could put on a suit and tie, get a pack of Marlboro, go to South Beach, have a drink, do a few lines, hook up with a young broad. I'm human. You know what I mean? I'm human. But you know what? You got to look at the big picture. The big picture is that, unfortunately, when you cross over the line of addiction, when you use, there's consequences. And when you could accept the facts that you don't want to live with them, the consequences are what keep me clean. Not the drinking and the drugging. I like to drink. I like to smoke coke. I like to smoke cigarettes. But I don't like the consequences that come along with it. So the consequences keep me clean. Once you realize that you're powerless over the first one, and your life is going to become manageable. If you use, you're going to stay clean a day at a time. You just got to get through a day. You don't have to get through a whole lifetime. It's a day at a time program. You know what I mean? And you got to understand there's consequences behind our behavior when you cross over that line into addiction. So you got to put some distance between you and the first one, and you got to use some tools. You feel like getting high, make a phone call. Call somebody, go for a run, go to the gym. Go to a meeting, raise your hand, say, my name's so-and-so, I'm an addict, I feel like getting high today. People are going to reach out to you. You know, go to a 12-step fellowship. And you know, that's what I do. That's what keeps me clean. You know, and because you feel like doing something doesn't mean you got to do it. You know, the feeling isn't going to kill you. The drugs are what's going to kill you. The alcohol is what's going to kill you, not the feeling. You know, yeah, it feels like at the time that you're going to die if you don't get another one, but it's for the past. You just got to hold on and you got to do other things. So I just want to let everybody know that today I hit 19,000 subscribers. That's really big for me. My podcast is going up every day. I want to thank everybody for their support. You know, my video I put out today with Mikey Francis was nice enough to come on my show. I'm gonna, you know, we broke it up into a couple of episodes. It was at number 3. Now it's charting at number 1 for me. I want to thank him very much. He's a really good guy. And he's busy, and he found time to come on my show. That was really nice of him. You know, everything I did with Sammy, I want to emphasize again, it's all going good. You know, everything on that level is booming. We have some things on the fire. He actually called me twice today, which was a pleasant surprise. We're talking about a lot of things. So that's moving forward. I know, so I'm looking forward to that. I want to give a shout out to my cousin, Gene Barillo. He's home out of prison. I'm trying to get him on my show. I know he's a lot of people are trying to get him on his podcast. I hope he chooses me first, being that we're cousins, my favorite Uncle Jr. was his grandfather. So I'm looking forward to having him on my show, and I wish him well, and I hope he stays out of trouble and does the right thing, and people leave him alone and stop bad rapping him, you know, like all these other guys on his podcast that want to talk ill about him. You know, he's a good kid. He's got a lot of heart, and I hope, everything works out for him.